no paradise, no fall. And if there had been no fall, then the entire historic fabric of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the story of the first sin, and the reason for the atonement, collapses like a house of cards. Exactly what the Illuminati has in mind. They are trying to effectively topple Christianity's house of cards. Then, ideas that have been promoted by guys like Sir Francis Bacon, for example, bringing back the golden age of Atlantis, seems pretty viable. Promoted, of course, by the British Royal Society, who also have a hand. The entire grip on the Middle East is coming from Britain. America is only the tool being used at the moment, along with the Palestinians and along with the Jews. See, the greatest goal of Freemasonry, the queen at the head of the Freemasonry movement, is to rebuild Solomon's temple and install the occult one as God, not the Holy One, and an important symbol that plays a huge role in this plot, this conspiracy. Because after all, the Bible is based on a conspiracy. The symbol is the six-pointed star, figures prominently. The star is associated with sexual depravity, whoring after false gods. It's the hexagram from the occult, magic, and necromancy of Egypt. But how did this figure become popular in Israel? In one word, Solomon. King Solomon, after he became king of Israel, violated all the specific commands to God and from God to kings. And he did it on an unprecedented scale. Those special commandments of God to the kings, which Solomon violated and like no other, look them up yourself in Deuteronomy 17. There's no wonder that the goal of Freemasonry is to rebuild Solomon's temple. And Solomon made a bond with the Pharaoh king of Egypt and took the Pharaoh's daughter as his wife and brought her into the city of David. Then he finished building his own house, and then he started building the house of what he called the Lord, and the wall of Jerusalem around about it. The influence of this daughter of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was no doubt incredibly immense. She was preeminent, and she was the most exalted among all of his wives. Solomon worshipped, among other gods, Ashtoreth, Astarte, Ishtar, Isis, Venus, Aphrodite, Milcom, Moloch, Chemosh. And the Illuminati has got us, if you listen carefully into the newscasts, even on this show, you will hear goddess worship. That's right. They are bringing back the worship of goddesses. Paris Hilton, I got to tell you, is a goddess. What's a phrase thrown around so loosely these days? You're a god. You are a god. Ah, thank you. See, man is God, according to the Illuminati. And they are going to try and prove through science that God does not exist. That's why the hunt for the source of life, so that they can copy it, which will never happen. Solomon was involved in satanic rituals, including human sacrifice, witchcraft, sexual orgies. Solomon built high places, high temples and altars for these pagan abominations, for all of his foreign wives, and joined them to burn incense and do sacrifice to their gods. It was without a doubt Solomon, not David, who adopted the hexagram, which became known as Solomon's seal, or Solomon's shield. He became a wizard, or consulter of demons, and was involved with forbidden occult powers of darkness of Lucifer, Satan, the devil. So the hexagram became a prominent symbol in ancient Israel, which can be traced no farther back than Solomon. He adopted it from the pagan nations around him. Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio. There is no evidence to connect the hexagram with David, the House of David. There is no reason to believe that David, a man after God's own heart, would ever adopt a satanic, occult, or pagan symbol for his shield, for his family emblem. But Satan, the devil, the chief of liars and deceivers, would certainly love to have you think so. Why and how did the six-pointed star, the pagan occult symbol, become connected with the modern state of Israel? Well, it was adopted as a royal crest, or the coat of arms by the Rothschild family. During the 19th century, the Rothschilds bought a lot of property in Israel from the Turks and the Arabs, before it was Israel. And they were the largest financiers, supporters of the Zionist movement in the early decades. The influence of the Rothschilds and their heavy financial support of Israel led, pushed, shoved, forced the Jewish nation to adopt the so-called Star of David as their own symbol as a nation. A Masonic book called The Second Mile, an Eastern Star book, reveals to the reader that the six-pointed star is a very ancient symbol and one of the most powerful. The hexagram is used in magic, witchcraft, sorcery, occultism, and the casting of zodiacal horoscopes by astrologers. It was considered to possess mysterious powers. Coming up on AM 640, Toronto Radio, A View from Space, more on the six-pointed star. Also, Nostradamus' prediction of September 11th. Also, the Irish and how they fit in. The Stone of Scone and more, all coming up. I'm Space, back with more in a moment.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640, Toronto Radio. The Step. He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But can you take it? This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
The guy we call Space, it's AM 640, Toronto Radio. I'm on about the hexagram at the moment, just starting off the show, the Seal of Solomon, otherwise known. Now it's emblazoned onto a piece of cloth that is going to drag the world into World War III, otherwise known as the Israeli flag. It's two triangles, one upside down and one right side up. And they're unionized, pushed into one another to create the hexagram, which is the male-female sexual act. Yes, Freemasonry is all about sex. Yes, the Illuminati's religion is centered around sex. This is one great weekend for them. Gay Pride Week. Satan is bisexual. The Antichrist to come is bisexual. It is legislated for us to be bisexual. They're even legislating very cleverly. They're legislating immorality by raising the age to legally have sex from 14 to 16. Now, you and I know 16-year-olds are not ready for sex. Any, not conservative person, any person with any kind of conscience at all knows that. But yet you have your government legislating immorality. It's okay, we endorse 16-year-old sex. Enough said on that. I don't want to get off the topic. But you know what? I've been saying their numerology, 7 and 8, the numbers especially, they're being pushed sort of like the flavor of the month. 14 is a double 7. It's raised to 16, which is a double 8. There are the two numbers I've been talking about for maybe a month now. No, sorry, more than that. Last year, at July 7th, 07, I began talking about the numbers 7 and 8, where they will be fitted into news stories. And here we have it. The 17 arrest of the terrorists, so-called terrorists here in Toronto. It's an 8. You know how many were arrested on Friday with the same thing, with the buzzword homegrown terrorists? They had the alleged plot uncovered. It was exactly the same as the one up here in Canada 3 Fridays ago. And, of course, it was on the same day, a Friday, this past day, that they arrested 7. There it is again. Because, you see, and it's coming up on A View from Space on AM 640 Toronto Radio about the 7th millennium, which is one of the reasons why the 7 is being used. And also I'll mention the 8, if I have time to. There's so much to get to tonight. But they mark their moves and their black magic spells with numerology. The timing is from astrology. And occasionally they throw in the sacred geometry, which I'm about to get to. So we've established that there is no connection between the hexagram and King David. None. It's the seal of Solomon. Rothschilds pushed the flag on the Jewish state called Israel to adopt it as the flag. Because they have the most sway, they got the most money. The Masonic book, the Second Mile, I told you about that, the Eastern Star book, reveals that the 6-pointed star is a very ancient symbol, one of the most powerful, used in magic, witchcraft, sorcery, occultism. It's a mysterious symbol with exceptional powers, believed by the Illuminati. The 6-pointed star is used by magicians and alchemists. The sorcerers believed it represented the footprints of a special kind of demon called the Trud, and use it in ceremonies. Some of the ceremonies were used to call up demons, and some were to keep them away. The 6-sided or hexagram stars, revered as a religious symbol by the Hebrews, who call it the seal of Solomon, and the Hindus, who call it the mark of Vishnu. Yes, the seal of Solomon. The hexagram is not solely a Jewish design. As a matter of fact, the Jews borrowed it from ancient pagan cultures before them. The mark of Vishnu is named after a god-man who was half man, half fish. And believe me, the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, believes in this god-man, half fish, known as the Nomos, from Sirius, the star Sirius, the dog star. More on that coming up on A View from Space on AM 640, Toronto Radio. This seal of Solomon is also remarkably similar to the symbol used by the Raelians, who believe that the scientists from another planet created all life on Earth using DNA. Now this DNA, as they call it, is man trying to find out how life is formed, then copy it themselves, which, as I've already stated, which will never, ever be accomplished. Here's what the Illuminati believe about DNA. They believe that DNA, the ancient Kabbalistic tree of life, portrayed in the Bible, Torah, is now coming to be viewed as a live, vibrating structure. And today's scientists look at DNA as a shimmering waveform configuration, able to be modified, changed, by light, radiation, magnetic fields, or sonic pulses. This information was passed down from Enoch and Thoth, the chief god of the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, saying that this language of light, the harmonic science of the ancients, could actually affect DNA. They believe the Merkaba spirals us, and by virtue of our DNA, spirals us out of this reality and spins us into another reality, and then another, and then another. And we're about to spin into another reality as our DNA will be miraculously, magically changed. That's where we're headed. 6 pairs of twin strands. 6 is how many points the Star of David has. And the Merkaba, 12 strands, with the 12 tribes of Israel. The Illuminati want you to think, want you to believe that you have a Merkaba field around you. And we use it to connect with the higher dimensions. It's the divine light vehicle used by the masters to connect with and reach those in tune with the higher realms. This also balances our yin-yang, duality, our polarity, our electromagnetic energies. In the sacred mystery schools, sacred geometrical exercises were the basis of their beliefs. It was understood that in order to transform your physical body into light, that you had to create an energy field of light around you in order to separate you from the lower vibrations. More on the Merkaba, the vehicle of light. Even mentioned in the Bible by Ezekiel, coming up on AM 640 Toronto Radio. It's the Spaceman on A View from Space. Back with more in a moment.
Expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. History buffs, monarchists masticate, truth seekers cheer. He's the Spaceman with A View from Space. AM 640 Toronto Radio.
I'm the Spaceman. It's A View from Space on AM 640 Toronto Radio. So we all have a Merkaba field around us. It's used to connect with the higher dimensions, you see. It's the divine light vehicle used by the masters to connect with and reach God, their inner self. Yes, they say don't look outside your body or for God. They say look inside your body for God. Because you are God. And you can be transformed into a god through Gnosticism. Knowledge levels. The change is coming to change our DNA so that we will become gods. Well, that's what they tell you. That's what they want you to swallow. That's what they want you to believe. Sacred mystery schools teach sacred geometrical exercises. They're the basis for the beliefs. You see the ancient religion of the Chinese, where you move your body slow motion. Step slowly, move your arms. That's what this is about. It's the Merkaba, the vehicle of light, mentioned in the Bible by Ezekiel. Mer means light. Ka means spirit. Ba means body. Merkaba. And it rotates when it's activated. It means spirit body surrounded by counter-rotating fields of light, wheels within wheels, spirals of energy, like DNA, they say, which transports spirit body from one dimension to another. They're confusing you with all of this gobbledygook just to get you into demon worship. That's what it's about. Worshipping the self, worshipping the goddess, and then eventually worshipping a man here on earth that will be installed in Solomon's third building of the temple. The Merkaba serves as a balance to all chakras and leads you into whole brain synchronization, which falls into that. It's the Spaceman on A View from Space on AM 640 Toronto Radio. The merge of the hourglass becomes the Star of David, which is the spiraling frequency of ascension. When you put the two triangles together, you produce the Star of David, which is also the sexual act between male and female. Which is also the spiraling frequency of ascending to a higher level. 12, the number 12 is about time, or the illusion of time created by the energies of the Great Pyramid, combined with its ethereal twin, pyramid twins, the hourglass. Time. There are 12 hours on a clock. The way our souls spiral into consciousness, the spirals, the gold spirals, is alchemy. The Hopi Indian tribe, Blue Star Prophecy. The Hopi prophecy speaks of twin Kachinas, white and blue. The merging of self, twin pyramids, twin towers imploding. Get the connection? It's a place of global communication, the Twin Towers. They didn't fall. They imploded, merged into each other. They showcased it September 11th, 2001, the wake-up call for humanity. And isn't that exactly the way they describe the Twin Towers imploding, merging into one another, like the two triangles of the Star of David? The Great Pyramid's a double helix. Jacob's Ladder is the DNA map. The Rainbow Bridge. What a great weekend to be talking about the rainbow sign. It's the one picked up by the gays. The rainbow. The meaning is being changed. The rainbow used to mean God's promise of never flooding the earth again. A miracle. A covenant. Now it signifies sexual orientation. The meaning's been changed. The Christian house of cards is collapsing. The twin serpents, the twin towers, same thing, are said to represent the Ida, the Pinjaya, the two tunnels or pathways of psychic energy which live in your body, they tell you, and which channel and regulate the flow of psychic energy. This flow must become balanced into a central tube for the Kundalini, the spiritual energy, to flow safely. The Kundalini, the spiritual energy that you have, they say is directly augmented or suppressed in the body by the patterns of breath and breathing that each person uses. It's strengthened by meditation, they say. That's why they say, open your mind to things like yoga. To be made whole, complete, Osiris must have his pillar, or his wife of the divine marriage, the chemical wedding. This is describing what happens when the Kundalini, the spiritual energy, rises through the chakras of your body to the pituitary gland and joins the cosmic energy in the pineal gland, or the pineal gland, to form the divine marriage. The pineal gland, or the pineal gland, is exactly in the middle of your forehead, between your eyes. Some call it the third eye. So after you go through a few initiations, a person attains enlightenment, symbolized by the presence of the elect, or the 144,000 in fully functioning DNA. When this individual has mastered his own individual flow of energy and unsealed or opened each chakra and its corresponding system of biochemical energy and organic energy, they must face that final struggle, or Armageddon, which is the prerequisite for attaining the 8th level of psychic power. Can you tell where they're headed? It's the Spaceman on AM 640, Toronto Radio. Back with more in a minute on A View from Space.
This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio. You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the right to free speech while he still can. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
I'm Space. This is AM 640, Toronto Radio, and A View from Space. Talking about DNA right now, also the Star of David. King Solomon's building the Third Temple. And also, what the world is going through right now with the Twin Towers imploding, forming one, coming together, the ethereal twins, the energies coming together to cause a wake-up call for humanity. After all, the Twin Towers in New York City were a place of global communication. So this takes this message to a global level. Two pathways of psychic energy collapsed into one, imploding. That's one of the initiations that the world has just gone through. Now, soon, we face the final struggle, or Armageddon, which is the prerequisite for attaining the 8th level of psychic power. Now do you know why they're choosing 8 in our news stories lately? See, the fully enlightened individual, according to the Illuminati, attains the Christ consciousness, which 888 symbolizes. They master the physical and metaphysical laws of karma, which is how the person becomes immortal, and is free from the necessity to reincarnate, because they believe we keep coming back until we have gained enough consciousness, have risen to the Christ consciousness, which is 888, what that number symbolizes. Then you no longer have to come back to Earth in a reincarnate position. The 64 elements or codons in the DNA are a total of 20 amino acids with the different quantities of this 64 codons plus 2 and 1 stop codon. Kabbalah and the Tarot both describe a belief system with 22 elements in it too. As a matter of fact, the Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. Crop circle cards also use a similar pattern, a similar system. And there's a very famous person in sport who has taken that number 22, the 22 elements, and put it front and center, right into your mind. The man's name is Roger Clemens. His number is 22. He was signed to a $22,022 and 22 cent contract to play baseball. His first start was Thursday, June the 22nd. So you see what I mean about our news events carrying the black magic spells and numerology for it all to come about. So what dimension are we on? Hang in with me. This gets good. Taken from Isaiah and Daniel. For in the sky the stars and Orion will shed their light no longer. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will no longer give its light. I am going to shake the heavens. The Messiah will give a sign to the nations. Michael will appear. The Son of Man will come on the clouds of heaven. And the Messiah shall gather the lost ones of Israel from all 4 corners of the earth. 4. That number is the most used number in the whole universe. 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. Gravity, electromagnetic, weak atomic force, strong atomic force. Then the 4 elements, earth, water, fire, air. With those you can make cars. Out of the earth you take the metal, you bend the metal, melt the metal with fire, you cool it with water. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. 4 more. The most used in our universe is the number 4, which is the number of foundation. So I just talked to you about the piece taken from Isaiah, with Daniel speaking. That's the second coming. The Illuminati want you to believe the second coming is happening within your body, not outside. Remember, they want you to look inside for God, not outside of your body for God. The throne of God is a sacred geometry symbol for the golden mean and represents the seat or the basis for the created world in rebirth, moving from 4 to 5, equaling life. The phrase 12-strand DNA, it's a metaphor. It's linked to sacred geometry and the digital code 1212. 12 around one source, return to the source and new creation at this time. It's also the double helix, the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel, by birth date, are Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Manasseh, and Ephraim. The implosion of the Twin Towers in New York City is a double helix in Kundalini's Ida and the Pingala. The two tunnels are pathways of psychic energy. When they balance, they become one, opening the door for full DNA connection. That was the message. That was the wake-up call for humanity. It's about connecting to the sacred. See, it's the Illuminati's job to connect to the 12 tribes of Israel. The full DNA, return to the source, and a new creation will be birthed. That is what they believe. How to do this? Jacob's pillar stone, or the stone of destiny, is the DNA. Jacob used the stone for a pillow the night he wrestled with God. After God changed his name to Israel, he then used it as a pillar to mark the covenant he made with God. Tradition has it that the stone was taken to Egypt and later to the Promised Land, Israel, when the Israelites came out of Egypt. Today, we're not sure where it is. But every single monarch ever been crowned to sit on the British throne has been coronated on the stone of destiny. This whole story is in the coat of arms of the Windsors. It's the Spaceman on AM 640, Toronto Radio. This stone of destiny, called Leah Thale in Ireland, Jacob's pillar stone, another name for it, was used as Jacob's pillow, where Jacob saw his visions from God in a place he called Bethel, which means house of God. The stone from that moment was predestined to become Christ's throne on earth, and it was taken by Jacob and his children to Egypt. 400 years later, during the exodus from Egypt under Moses in the wilderness 40-year punishment wandering, the Leah Thale, the stone of destiny, the stone of Scone, was carried on a pole until the Israelites conquered Canaan and built Jerusalem. And then it became the king's throne, King David's throne, who slew Goliath the giant with a stone from his sling. Every one of the succeeding king from David's line were crowned on the Leah Thale, Jacob's pillar, the stone of Scone, which was kept in God's house, the holy temple built by David's son, King Solomon, on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, until King Zedekiah was overthrown by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon for breaking the covenant. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon's soldiers destroyed Solomon's holy temple on the mount, which is the holiest place on earth, because what happened there? It was where Abraham, centuries before, offered to sacrifice his miracle son Isaac for God. There's more to come, so much more on A View from Space on AM 640, Toronto Radio. More in a minute.
This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio. Mondays expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640, Toronto Radio. Ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole in today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio.
I'm the Spaceman on AM 640, Toronto Radio, and A View from Space. You can give me an email at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. A couple of addresses for you. Start time was 9 o'clock tonight. It's not always the same every Saturday night. And you can't even check your local listings to find out. Because this is the only show on the face of the earth where no one knows what time it starts. Thus saith the Lord, I am. Remove the diadem, meaning sovereignty, and take off the crown. This shall not be the same. Exalt him that is the low line of Zara, and abase him that is the high line of Pharez. Another verse, I will overturn. 1. I will overturn. 2. I will overturn. 3. And it shall be no more overturned until he comes whose right it is, and I will give it to him. The Shiloh, the Christ. What we're talking about here is the stone of destiny. And with the stone of destiny goes the power to rule the world. It's always through relics, isn't it, that has the power with the Illuminati. It's never God. It's always an object. It's always the creation, not the creator. And that's your difference. That will keep your feet solidly on the ground and your spirit, your soul, going to the place it should when the time comes. From Egypt, the stone was shipped through Spain, overturned, and Ireland, then overturned again before arriving in Scotland, where it was overturned again, and finally placed on the throne of England, underneath of the monarch's chair in Westminster Abbey, where all of the kings of England were crowned, where they got the power. The final overturn before Christ returned, the theft of the stone in Westminster Abbey in 1950. Before Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, the stone was stolen. Queen Elizabeth II is not descended from the royal line of David. From the tribe of Judah. They're impostors. And from the tribe of Dan, which goes all the way back to Cain. But Prince William and Harry, a different story. They are related legitimately to all the kings and queens that Britain ever had because of their mother, Princess Diana, who was a Spencer. The Spencers are related to Mary, Queen of Scots, the true heir to the throne of Britain. Now the impostors, the highest royal family of the occults, the Saxe-Coburg-Goths, known as the Windsors, is mixed with the highest bloodline of the House of David. The occult comes together with the highest family of the royal bloodline in William and Harry. Don't you find that fascinating? And Princess Diana was dispatched from this earth quickly after it was done. The British history of the Stone of Scone, which every monarch Britain ever had was coronated with it, goes like this. There are two stones called the Stone of Destiny. One is obviously not the genuine stone, but it's a fake. Some say made by Bailey Bertie Gray. Then there's the connection with Columba of Kells, and Iona being the guardian of the stone, because the Leah Fail, the Stone of Scone, the Stone of Destiny, was allegedly kept in Columba's church in Dundee, Scotland, until the authorities found out and sealed up the building with the alleged real Leah Fail still inside of it. Then legend has it was rescued by the Knights Templar, who have it at this very moment secreted away in a church in Perthshire, at Dull in Scotland. So here we have again the link with Columba, because Adamnan's church is built into the grave mound of Adamnan, who wrote the life of Columba around 685 after death. Shortly after Columba's death, and Columba is confirmed, by the way, by his prophecy titled Shanus, which is a physical second coming of Christ, prophetic poem. To be King of Ireland is foretold, an event that will finally defeat the English Davidic monarchy, unite Ireland under Christ's sovereignty, and bring peace and prosperity to all of the people. That's the prophecy from Columba in a story or poem called Shanus. Ancient Irish history. There is a Stone of Destiny that's on display at Edinburgh Castle. Is that the original? Or is it secreted away by the Knights of the Templar? The ones who have the Spear of Longinus, the ones who have the Stone of Scone, and the ones who have the Ark of the Covenant, those three relics will surely be able to rule the world. Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio, on A View from Space. In ancient Irish religion and mythology, Tara was also the sacred home for the Ari, later the Irish, changed later to Irish, who ranked below the Ili-gods, yet above the people. They were semi-gods. Ireland, or as it was known then, Ireland, takes its name from the Eris, the lion. Ilion in Hebrew, or Aryans. Ireland's considered the great motherland of the Aryan race, otherwise known as Atlantis, Tula, or Tula. So says William Henry in his book called The Secret Throne of the Illuminati Discovered. Abraham had a couple of sons, two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Everyone can agree with me there. Ishmael lived 137 years. He had 12 sons who became the founders of the Ishmaelites, tribes that spread from Egypt to what is today Iraq. And a lot of the modern-day Arab people correctly recognize that they are the descendants of Ishmael, while the Jews and the rest of the Israelites are descendants of Isaac. But all are descended from Abraham. I bring that up a lot on AM 640, Toronto Radio. Why? Because I know the Illuminati is trying to pit Muslim against Christian. And the three monotheistic religions, I've said many times, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, must go. And they all have one Father. They all come from the same place. The Israelite is the ethnic group claiming a covenant with God and descent from Abraham and Isaac, especially from Isaac's son Jacob, later called Israel. The Christians and the Jews. Jews are from Jacob's son Judah's line, and particularly from Judah's son Pharez, the so-called firstborn. More on that later. Judah's other son Zerah and the Zerahites populated Spain and northern Mediterranean. The Trojans and the Isles afar off, they called them, like the British Islands and Ireland itself, joining their cousins, the Danites. Dan, by the way, is Jacob's fifth son. More in a moment. This is AM 640, Toronto Radio. And a view from space. Back in a minute.
This is Space with the Spaceman. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
Catch up.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
I'm Space, it's AM 640, Toronto Radio, and a view from space. If you'd like to email me, got a comment, or if you have questions, or if you have information, space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. I thank you for the ones that I have already. And I'm awful sorry sometimes I can't get to answering them all. It's pretty much a one-man show. The Illuminati believe they must uncover the truth and connect to our true history and true lineage. Simply put, this is an excuse to form a one-world government. They will say it's God's plan when it's really the plan of Satan. Through this plan, they believe many will experience paradise, the land of milk and honey. through the power of their thought forms and their consciousness. This ability is what they call the crossing. Its roots from the word Hebrew, crossing the Jordan into paradise and the Red Sea into freedom. The most likely origin of the word Hebrew is taken from br, 2 letters, B-R, which means to cross over a boundary. Included in this thought is that a Hebrew would be one who crossed over, or one who went from place to place, a nomad, a traveler, a wanderer, a stranger, an alien. The living language of light was known to the ancients as Hebrew. According to Michael Cicerien, the seat of religion and civilization is found in the ancient British Isles, where the Druids once ruled. He believes the real Hebrews were the ancient Irish, and uses etymology, the meaning of words, many Gaelic and Celtic words and scholars to back up this claim that he makes. Meath, Ireland, was the home of the Druid councils, and Tara, the capital, the seat of the high chieftains of the Druid councils. As one of their leading beliefs, souls, and I'm quoting Julius Caesar here, okay? As one of their leading beliefs, souls are not annihilated, but pass after death from one body to another. And they hold that by this teaching, men are much encouraged to valor through disregarding the fear of death. They also discuss and impart to their young many things concerning the heavenly bodies and their movements, the size of the world and our earth, natural science, and the influence and power of the immortal gods. Julius Caesar, when he was talking about the Druids and the Gaelic Wars. Brainwashing by the Druids is what he was talking about in plain language. Edward Spencer wrote, he's a British government official in Ireland. I'm not sure if he's a member of the Spencer family. Diana Spencer, her family. But he is quoted as saying, the Irish are one of the most ancient nations that I know of, and at this end of the world, and are from as mighty a race as the world ever brought forth. You've heard the old joke, haven't you? Why did God invent Irish whiskey? Well, it's so that the Irish wouldn't take over the world. There's been a smokescreen that's been maintained around Ireland since the English invasion. And then the looting of the island with the destruction of her sacred shrines, which was meant to obscure her great past and her contribution in letters, science, culture, religion, civilization. And it goes without saying, that we owe more to the ancient Ireland for the blessings than any other people or nation. So it's said. People wonder how could Easterners have traveled across the sea in boats which they are not meant to have had. Because they found Egyptian artifacts in remote parts of Ireland. How could they navigate the seas and the oceans to come to a place like Ireland, live and die there, and leave their remains behind them? Those kind of questions really puzzle those who've looked at the history of the ancient world. The fact that ancient Egyptian relics are found in Ireland, and that Irish relics, like the Ohio Serpent Mound and Round Towers, found in the United States. How did they get there? Well, the Illuminati are embarking on a plan that will unravel all these questions and reveal the answers about how mankind did all these things, and of his destiny, and of his true purpose. It's the most exciting time in the world of the history of man to be alive. Right now. AM 640, Toronto Radio, Spaceman, A View from Space. So, it's said, believe it or not, that the word Hebrew referred only to the root language of the world, which was Gaelic, and to the cult of Druid priests whose astromantic knowledge brought enlightenment to all corners of the earth. It was only a lot later in history that the world's meanings, words, were rendered false and made to refer to ethnic and racial status. Now we use the word Hebrew for a group of people. Adders. It means Druid magi. This word comes from the Gaelic nandred, meaning serpent, or from the earlier gnader. This gn, gn, is also the prefix of our word Gnosticism. From the Greek meaning esoteric knowledge or spiritual truth held by the ancient occultists to be essential for salvation. This is the reason why the Freemasons employ wise ones who worship the serpent. More on that and where the G comes from in Freemasonry in a moment on AM 640, Toronto Radio. It's a Space on A View from Space. Back with more.
This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio. As expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640, Toronto Radio. Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio.
I'm the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. It's AM 640, Toronto Radio. Taking your emails at space at 640 Toronto Radio or spaceman at 640 Toronto Radio.com. So I was on about the Gaelic nandred, meaning serpent, and the prefix of GN comes from the early Nadr, G-N-A-D-R. This GN is also the prefix of the word Gnosticism, which means reaching higher levels of consciousness through knowledge, which is satanic worship. The G, or GN, is the symbol of the wise ones who worship the serpent. This is one of the reasons why the Freemasons have the G in the center of their compass. The letter symbol G of the Masons is taken from the word Gaonim, the elite members of the Judaic Talmudic schools in Babylon, where the ancient mystery Babylonian religion was taught. But since the Egyptians and the Semites got all their sacred knowledge from the Druids, when all is said and done, the Druids must have gotten their information from the Atlanteans. The High King of ancient Ireland was called Nuada, or Nada. His name comes from that word, Nadrid, meaning wise serpent. The ruler or chieftain in Ireland, as well as in Egypt, was a master of all the arts. Let's call him a semi-god. Half god, half man. Like the Nomo from the dog star Sirius, the closest star to Earth. The one I believe that when alien contact has been made, it will be from the dog star Sirius. That's why we have a major extraterrestrial radio company. Possibly through music? Let's wait and see. Possibly 2012? Let's wait and see. The word Hebrew did not relate to a particular race, but to the ones I'm talking about, the wise ones, the worshippers of the serpent, originally called the Ibaru, or the Ibrech of Ireland, and later of Egypt. These were an ancient race of arch-magi who worshipped the stars and the zodiac, and who had churches all over the world. It was incredibly important for the ones who controlled the modern church to hide the existence and origin of these high priests of the sun, while their sun-worshipping Masonic ways were quietly incorporated into true Christianity, weaved in so slowly and so seductively. It was done in a couple of ways which caused all the confusion. Conscious mistranslation, and, the second, deliberate misspelling of nouns. One of the first attempts at tricking people with certain words concerned the Gaelic word Ibrech. This is the origin of the word Hebrew. The letter H was placed before this Gaelic word to disguise its original meaning, so you get Hebraic instead of Ibrech, or Hebrew. The second deception had to do with what they say is a chance similarity between the words Ibaru and the words Apiru. It was allowed to be conveniently and surreptitiously, meaning cleverly hidden so nobody would notice, turned into a name for a race of people. The ancient word Apiru is found in the ancient Sumerian, Assyrio-Babylonian, and Egyptian texts. It meant a wanderer, an immigrant, or an undesirable person or group of people. It was used to name those who were living within the borders of a sovereign country but who were a disturbance or a nuisance, the ones who were not wanted. It may also have come from the word aber or ober, which also means passers-by or travelers, or those without a homeland. Ibrech, Hebrew. Apiru is also thought to have been the name for farmers or shepherds. This connotation allowed some researchers to assign the name Hebrews to the invaders, known to the Egyptians as the Hyksos people, the ones I was talking about last week on AM 640, Toronto Radio on A View from Space. that warlike tribe who were the Phoenicians that built originally were the planners and the workers of the first Temple of Solomon. The Hyksos, a warlike people who were the very first ones. Well, let me just talk about that in a minute. The Hyksos were Phoenicians who traded with the Egyptians. And for their cedars, they were great shipbuilders. They were the first ones to be able to circumnavigate the globe. That's how they got to Ireland. That's how they got to Mexico. That's how they got to Spain. That's how they got to China. They traded with the Egyptian pharaohs. They traded their great cedar wood to build ships. And they got back gold and silver. And that's why gold and silver to this very day is your most precious metals. And they still control you today with those special, shiny metals. There's a lot of confusion over the origins of the race of this warlike tribe called the Hyksos. They were, in fact, the descendants of the tribe of Dan who were kicked out. They once conquered Egypt, reigned there for almost 200 years in the Middle East. The word Hyksos means shepherd king. And some say it was only used to describe the leader or the king and not the whole tribe or race. They were the Phoenicians, the builders of Solomon's first temple. The Hyksos kings, according to some scholars, were certainly not Hebrews or Israelites. They were rejected by God, the tribe of Dan. But I believe these people were, in fact, related directly to Cain, the world's first Freemason. This is the blood lineage of the union between Satan and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This group of ferocious, warlike people were the first ones, as I said, to circumnavigate the globe on the oceans, and were the first to use horses in battle. And that area they lived in the Middle East. A distinct advantage, wouldn't you agree? A horse in those days would be tantamount to having a tank against foot soldiers. I talked in depth about this last week on AM 640 Toronto Radio on A View from Space. I also connected them with Poseidon, the supreme god of Atlantis, who was the god of the seas, and also had the horse as one of his symbols, as well as the trident. And he was the very first to train a horse to be ridden and used in battle. And this ancient knowledge, of course, was passed down to the Hyksos, their family ancestors, the descendants from the lost continent of Atlantis. Space back with more on AM 640 Toronto Radio on A View from Space in a moment.
This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640 Toronto Radio. He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But can you take it? This is A View from Space with the Spaceman, AM 640 Toronto Radio.
Hi, it's Space. This is AM 640 Toronto Radio on A View from Space. So, Hebrew is actually taken from other words, meaning passers-by, travelers, those without a homeland. It wasn't about a group of people. It wasn't a name of a race of people. Aparu was the name for farmers and shepherds. The shepherd kings were the Hyksos, the bloodline of Cain. who learned how to circumnavigate the globe by using the stars in the sky handed down to them from Poseidon, their ancient ancestor, who was so into black magic, the world, Earth, was flooded to get rid of them. They're building it up again. There was a remnant left, a remnant saved. These Hyksos were the Phoenicians, the builders, the planners of the very first Temple of Solomon, and are here on the earth again to build the third temple and to set up the New World Order, a one-world government with the highest, purest of their bloodline in the seat of power. These are the people of the ancient tribe of Dan. This is the blood lineage of the union between Satan and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This ferocious, warlike people are coming after you and I, are about to embark on a war that will eat up the lives of our daughters, yes, daughters, and our sons. Who's to stop them? How can you? They have the rule of law on their side. They make the law, you comply. The world must be complicit and ready when the one comes. The real Hebrews, Aperus, Ibrachs, wise ones, wanderers, passers-by, travelers, those without a homeland, were the Irish, the Phoenicians, who had brought culture to Egypt in the earliest periods of history after the great cataclysm which sank the great continent of old, the one they call Atlantis. See, Atlantis was real. It's not a myth, but it's not the legend and myth that they have sold you on. It's their failed conquest of black magic ruling the world with their bloodline at the top, which they're about to do again. Did you know that John Kerry, who ran against George W. in the last election for the United States, and who may run again, is actually of Hebrew origin and has lineage stemming from Ireland, which is how the last name was changed to Kerry, and has even more royal blood in his veins than George W. Bush has. George W.'s mother is also of royal lineage of British nobility. Check out the works of the master investigators like Connor McDree. No paradise, no fall. And if there had been no fall, then the entire historic fabric of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the story of the first sin, and the reason for the atonement, collapses like a house of cards. Exactly what the Illuminati has in mind. They are trying to effectively topple Christianity's house of cards. Then, ideas that have been promoted by guys like Sir Francis Bacon, for example, bringing back the golden age of Atlantis, seems pretty viable. Promoted, of course, by the British Royal Society, who also have the entire grip on the Middle East is coming from Britain. America is only the tool being used at the moment, along with the Palestinians and along with the Jews. See, the greatest goal of Freemasonry the queen at the head of the Freemasonry movement, is to rebuild Solomon's temple and install the occult one as God, not the Holy One. And an important symbol that plays a huge role in this plot, this conspiracy, because after all,